Maria, firstly, I want to thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You've made the journey from Kent to come up
Yes,
for a
I did.
full day of creating content, stuff for yourself.
Shooting, doing content, it's so weird, I come from a generation of sort of people that cringe when you are put in front of the spotlight for your self-promotion, especially as a woman.
Yeah. How have you found it? How long have you been doing it for?
Well, I don't know. I've been doing the podcast probably about 4 or 5 years. So, but it's still, those moments where you think, am I really having someone pointing a camera at me and taking a picture? But, you get used to it.
Yeah, it's funny. And you kind of beat everyone to the curve because podcasts are all over the place now. That's ironic. I'm saying that whilst you're doing mine.
Yeah.
So I said to you before we even started the cameras rolling, you're probably, out of all the guests I've had, the hardest, because there's just so much I want to get through with you. You've had such a journey, your knowledge, your experience. There's so much to cover. But I guess to keep things simple, the reason it's called the Story Club is because a large part of this is about your story. Mm-hmm. So I'd really love to go back to, your journey in life started in Latin America, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I was actually born in Chile right at the start of the dictatorship, the famous Pinochet dictatorship. So a country that was, I don't know if you know much about Chile. It's a lovely country, very long, very beautiful country. But it was, plagued with quite a lot of problems during 1973, which is when I was born. And to be born into a tumultuous situation that upended the economy, it upended my parents' lives. My dad was in the aviation industry. And so that changed everything, it changed everything for my whole family. So with a lot of people also left during that time. So I was there, and then after a couple of years of my dad trying to make things work, he got a job in Miami, and so we left when I was about maybe 2.5, 3 years old to Miami, and I was brought up in the States. So I did all my schooling in the States with a couple of traveling here and there. As I said, my dad was in the aviation industry, so I lived in Florida and California, in Madrid, in Argentina, different places.
So how was that for you, having to jump
it.
around, change your life a lot? So you adapted quite fast?
Well, you know what? I think, I don't know, I don't know the story whether or not people are born a certain way or they're made a certain way by the situations in their lives. I believe it's a bit of both. I guess all of those things prepared me for the life I have today. So it wasn't unusual for me to arrive to a new school and the teacher saying, "Oh, we have a new student today, Maria Villablanca." And I'd be like, "Yep, I got this." Stand in front of the class. "Hi, I'm Maria Villablanca. Let me tell you my story." And so I've been doing that for a long time. So I think it kind of prepared me for what I do today.
So it just came quite naturally, I guess because, sometimes kids can be quite cruel, and when you're the new kid, but you just threw yourself in and that worked?
Threw myself in, and I've always been the kind of person, even when I was little, that liked to stand up for the little guy. So it wasn't, even though being a girl, I was someone that would stand up to the class bully and just be like, "Oh yeah, why don't you pick on someone your own size?" Because I was a tall kid, and I was a basketball player, I was an athlete, so I was quite strong and opinionated, and so it was not uncommon for me to not have any fear to some degree of, well, much, really.
Was it quite hard to build relationships with people if you knew you were always going to be moving around?
Yeah, but you know what? I thought of it as an adventure. I had loads of friends, and then it was like, "Oh, we're moving to Buenos Aires. Wow, amazing, let's do it." I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready for the next adventure." And then I'd come in and make new friends, and I still am friends with people I've had since childhood. I've got one of my closest friends I had since I was 3 years old. So it actually, I would say, it made me have more relationships with people and longer term, and I would have pen pals, and yeah, it was great.
Nice, that's interesting. I suppose it could go either way, right? It's either someone finds it hard to create bonds, or if they've got it naturally, like you said, it just gave you an opportunity to make more close friends and more close friends and more close friends.
I think it's like a lesson in life, right? If you look at things from a specter of this is a negative, then the whole thing will be negative. I tried to find the opportunities in things. And so for me, the opportunity was the next adventure, newer friends. Yes, of course, any kid, especially as I got older, I didn't want to leave, especially by the time I was a teenager. I had a boyfriend. I was like, "No, I don't want to leave."
Yeah, okay.
So I think when I got to about 16, 17, my parents, we were more static. So I stayed in the same place because, yeah, I probably would have thrown my toys out and said, "I don't want to move now." But as a kid, it was great. It was an adventure.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it's when it gets those teenage years that life becomes a bit more real,
Correct.
and you want to feel that security and
Yeah.
being more established. So then 16, 17 would have been in America the last years
Yeah.
of school before going off to uni?
Yep, exactly.
Well, college.
Yeah. So I was there. I was in basketball, track and field. I was one of those kids that did everything. So I was in the debate club. I was in student government. I was in the law club. I was in everything you can think of. I love to participate. I love to get involved in stuff. I was like a full-time student in the sense that I was at school at 7 a.m. and I didn't leave till 9 p.m. sometimes because I was either playing a game or I was mentoring and teaching, tutoring other students, or I was in whatever club that I was in. I love to be involved.
So with all these interests and passions, how easy was it for you to start choosing where you were going to start directing things? Because you like trying a lot of different things, but then when you've got to go to college, you've got to choose. I can't remember, is it a minor, major type thing? Or
Not in the States. It's interesting in the States. You go into the United States. Yeah, you say that you want to, what major you're in, but you can change a million times over. So, which I find fascinating here in the UK, there's no way I would have known at age 17 or 18 what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
For sure, yeah.
So I think I went into college, to uni, with an economics degree or wanting to do economics. I ended up, studying astrophysics, and I've got a minor, or I was getting on track to get a minor in astronomy and study history and business. And I mean, I guess I've always had a voracious appetite for learning, for knowing more. I even took a class in architectural history. I mean, just you name it. I was interested in taking as many classes as possible.
So when you finished, what was it?
I didn't finish. I was on my way to finishing. So here's the other part. I think you asked a question about, there's so much to talk about, right? If I were to define myself, I would say I am a non-traditionalist person. I'm pretty traditional. I'm pretty conservative, believe it or not. But I am in the sense that I quite play it safe, right? Not politically, I meant. And but I am someone that has had a non-traditional path, right? So I was on track to go to finish uni. I was going to finish with a business degree and a minor in astronomy, of all things. And then tragedy struck. My dad's a bunch of things happened at once. My dad's business went bankrupt. My mom was recovering from cancer. Their marriage failed. There was no money. There was, everything was expensive to support me and my sister and my brother. And so as
Where were you based at this time?
Well, I was in northern Florida, in Gainesville, studying at the University of Florida. And I had to make a choice. And at the time, my boyfriend of 7 years had proposed, and we were going to get married. Well, no, I just thought, oh my goodness, all these things are going to happen, and I can see my life going in this path. And then this huge asteroid landed in my life that just upended everything. And so I had a choice to, go downhill and feel sorry for myself, or take action. And I'm a take action kind of person. So I took my sister took my mom to California to her sister's house, and I took my brother to Chile, where my grandparents are. And I said, let's go to Chile. My Spanish was really bad by this point because I've been raised in the States, and my language was more like at-home Spanish kind of thing. Pass me the salt, Mom. When's dinner? And I arrived to Chile with nothing, just to my grandparents' house, knowing I needed to make money to sort of support my brother and my family and bring my mom over.
So was this when you were around about 18, 19 then?
No, by this point I was 21.
Okay, because just when I was doing my research, I saw one of like your famous stories, or a real key point for you, was I think when you were 19, you joined a company and you got told you'd have to fight for your place.
No, that was in, well, I had been working. I've been working for a long time. I've been working since I was 14.
Right.
I got my first job out when I was in not even high school, junior high school, in the summer. My parents were very much believers that you need to work. I mean, they were very comfortable. We came from a pretty financially comfortable family. But my dad was just sick of me asking for money, so he's like, "Sorry, you've got to make your own money." So at age 14, I got a job selling advertising over the phone, and over a couple of weeks, I was better than everybody else. Nice. And the guy, my mom knew them, and so they were like a business across the hallway from my mom's business. And the guy said to her, my mom, can we keep her? She's so amazing. She sells so much. Can we keep her? My mom's like, she's 14. She's going in. She's got to go to school. So every summer I had a job. And every job I've had to fight my place for my place. Absolutely. Every job I've had to. And then when I was around this time at 21, I was working at a company doing marketing, sales, putting events together as an assistant. And the owner of the company, when I said to him, I'm leaving. I got to go. I got to go to Chile. He said, I'll pay you triple. I'll pay you whatever it is. Stay here in the United States. I'll take care of you because you're amazing. You're going so far. He said, you're going to go far. You're going to make a mistake leaving and throwing it all away. And I remember at age 20, 21, however old I was, I looked at him and I said, family comes first. And, and I was being offered tons of money and a potential opportunity to grow in a business. This guy was a millionaire. And I was like, I'm sorry, family comes first. And I was jumping into the unknown, and I jumped into the unknown. And then I landed in some job in a winery. And
This was in Chile.
This was in Chile. And a funny story, I got this job through my granddad. Back, in Chile, I mean, you're talking about in the year, 90s, right? So it must have been 96 or something like that. And my granddad, and it wasn't even in the capital, it was like in the south, very regional, very colonialized, colonial type of environment. What I mean by that is that it's all about the families that you know. So my granddad got me a job, walked into the winery, went up to the owner and said, we've known each other since we were kids, hire my granddaughter. And that's how I got my job. And I worked my way up with people that didn't believe that I had any talent at all. Because I didn't have a degree, and they would make me make tea or make coffee, and they would belittle me. The boss in front of my boss was not that guy, another guy that was the director of exports. He was patronizing, he was insulting, and it was like water off a duck's back. I thought, I have to deal with this crap. I just need to get on with it and demonstrate my abilities. And I did, and I demonstrated my abilities and kept getting promoted until I got to what I consider to be perhaps the best sales job I did ever. My best sales effort that I ever did was not a deal that I closed for money. It was a deal that I closed for myself. I was in the wine industry, and I was in this southern province, and this huge celebrity, major name in the wine industry, like huge celebrity, arrives, and I'm supposed to be his driver and translator. He was coming with his CEO to find to create a joint venture with a specific winery or set of wineries, and he was just shopping the area, looking around, and I was to be his interpreter. So all I did for about a week was just interpret. And because I speak a bit of French, so I was interpreting French, Spanish, English.
Nice, yeah.
And I had done the research, so I had read all the technical stuff and done everything. And this guy was really impressed with me. And as I'm driving him back, he's still not made his decision. As I'm driving him back to the airport, which is to his hotel in the capital in Santiago, 3-hour drive, just me, him, and the CEO. And in those 3 hours, I convinced him and pitched him that I was the person that he should put in charge of his joint venture over like $2 million. I was like 23. And I said, I'm the right person for the job. And he's like, why? And I said, because what you need, and this is something I've always been able to do, which is to spot a need and to find a way to fill it and to solve a problem. I'm a problem solver. So I said, because you need someone who can bridge the gap between the Chilean culture and how things are done in Chile and the American culture, how things are done in America. And I'm that person. And so, I mean, I make it sound easy, but over 3 hours of my explaining why I would be the best person for the job, he made me general manager. I remember arriving to the hotel and he said, all right, well, you might as well park up and come have dinner with me and the CEO. And I said, what? Why? And he said, well, because my new general manager needs to have dinner with us to celebrate. And he offered me a job, and I took charge of a joint venture that was amazing. And it was the best teacher in my life. You know why? Because this guy saw a young kid with a lot of talent, without an education, without a degree, and thought, I'm going to invest in that person. So what he did was something spectacular. He gave me the job, he trusted me, and then he put a series of consultants around me to teach me the ropes. Mm-hmm. So I had one of the ex-presidents of a major Fortune 500, who was his friend, be my business consultant. I had the top law firm, the top accounting firm, the top financial firm, all around me, the best winemaker, who I had weekly calls with to train me. And so I got on-the-job training over 2 years with some of the biggest and brightest minds while doing the job. So although I didn't have a university education, I was 3 months, 4 months away from graduating or something, I got a real hands-on education from some of the biggest names and experts in Latin America on business, on wine, on marketing, on sales, on procurement, supply chain, manufacturing, harvesting, you name it. I became an expert over 2 years, 3 years of doing that.
Well, so Maria, I guess I want to take a couple of steps back just because I'm really fascinated by the decision you made at 21, 22. You were offered triple your salary and you said family comes first. Why did you have to go back to Chile, or why did you? I understand like a lot happened, like you said, with your parents. But how was that decision made? You're obviously not money driven, but I'm curious.
Oh, I was very much money driven.
So what was the opportunity in Chile? Because obviously it worked out very well.
Well, yeah, it did work out well.
I think the thought process.
The thought process there was that my family was broken. My mother practically had a nervous breakdown. My 12-year-old brother was left without a parent because my dad left to go be with his new wife. My mother left to have her nervous breakdown with my sister, and I had a 12-year-old kid around to take care of. And I was 22.
Why couldn't you take care of him in the States, though?
Because I'd have to work full-time, and my brother would do what? You know, I wasn't going to be a 22-year-old single mom.
Right.
So I needed help, family help. And then that's where the grandparents came in. I thought I need to work full-time and make sure he goes to really good education, gets a really good education, gets family support, gets people around him, aunts, uncles, people that can help him not notice the shit show that's going around, that's happening in his life.
So how did you feel doing that? Because it was such a big leap. You'd obviously lived a life of adventures and moving around. So was it just another move, or
it was the way that I saw it? It was a necessity. The way that I saw it, it was one of those things that it wasn't about me. It wasn't about my parents. It was about my brother. So to me, it was about this 12-year-old kid that had no idea what was going on and had only one person to look up to, and that was me. And what better opportunity could I give him? Was it in the States where I'd be, I don't know, the equivalent of a single mom working, leaving a kid to sort of fend for himself, or go back to where my family was, regroup, circle the wagons, and start there. So it wasn't about me. It was not, at that point, my interests, my self-preservation took a back seat to taking care of my brother.
So you did the right thing for other people,
yeah,
and that worked out, whether you call it karma or whatever, because that moved you down the path where you got this amazing education on the job.
Yeah. I think you just make your opportunities, man. That's the way that I see it. It's not about, I could have gone there and been resentful and hated life and hated my dad or hated my mom or hated the fact that I was at 22 given this responsibility. And then, hating other people and being resentful is just a pill of poison you take for yourself. It doesn't hurt anybody else. It hurts you. And so I realized that that's not who I am. I am the person that creates opportunities. So I looked at it as another adventure.
I mean, it's such a great mindset to have. Sometimes it takes people years to, maybe become less blaming outside influences. Maybe not so much in America, because there's quite a more positive, we can go, we can do this. Do you think that played a part?
Yeah, definitely it was one of those, we can do this. I'm American by education. But I also think not everyone in America is like that. It's just a question of the way that I've always been. I am not, I've had a lot of privilege. So I want to start from the basis that I have lived a good life of privilege. I've got had a great education, had wonderful supporting parents, all of those things. So I looked at life, and that was interesting. And that moment shaped my life forever. If I had continued on that path, I would have been a kid that had everything handed to them since the day they were born, with tremendous privilege. And what would have happened? I don't know. I would have ended up getting married to my boyfriend, who was wonderful, had lots of money. Yeah, great. But no failure in my life. No, nothing to demonstrate the reality of life. And so to me, I'm extremely grateful for that failure, because it allowed me to decide at that moment that failure was not going to shake me. Failure was not going to define me, that failure happens. It's what you do with that failure that makes you the person that you are.
Yeah, it's almost like the path of least resistance would have left you feeling totally unfulfilled.
Completely.
And now you've had such an adventure. So we get back to you had all this on-the-job experience, you had your 3-hour pitch, and
Yeah.
you got
Got
given
a
that
job. It was
opportunity.
awesome.
Yeah. So you were working in
Chile.
the wine industry there.
Yeah, I was working in the wine industry. No, the only bad thing that came out of that job is that I am unfortunately a wine snob. I can't drink crap wine. That's the only thing. But I learned a lot, and then they pulled out of Chile and offered me the chance to go back to the United States. And I thought, nope, I don't want to go back to the States. I knew that Chile wasn't in my future because you're talking about the year at this point, 2000, give or take, and it was still pretty much a misogynistic society. With I was never going to advance. I knew that at best I would get to some managerial role, and that was it. And I'd have to be married off. I also came from a good family as it is over there, and so that's what all the girls dreamt of, is just marrying well. And that's what my cousins did, that's what my aunts did, and that's what you did. And I didn't want to do that. So I thought, where am I going to go? And I always looked for opportunities and remembered that I'm half Italian. And I asked my grandfather, how about you get your Italian passport? Because if you get it, then I can get it. And so I convinced him to do that. He did it. And I got my Italian passport, which allowed me to work in the EU. And I went to Germany. And because my sister was living there with her new husband.
Okay.
My younger sister by this point. So she's living in Germany. I arrive in Germany just with, I think I had $500 or something like that. I hitched a ride on an airplane through my dad. So I called my dad. By this point, we were back talking and happily reunited because I realized my dad was a human being, not, and he could make mistakes. Again, a healthy way of looking at things. And so I asked my dad, I said, can you get me to Europe? And he's like, well, let me see what I can do. And I said, I'll hitch a ride on anything. And there was a plane that was going back from, I don't know, without going into too much detail, but airplanes here in Europe get leased to airlines in the United States or Latin America during the off-peak. So when it's winter here, they go to summer there, and then they fill them to go to the Caribbean or something.
Makes sense.
So there was a plane from Germany leaving Chile, going back to Germany. And so I hitched a ride on that plane with just the pilots, and like a big plane, like a 737 or something, with the pilots and the stewardesses, and that's it, and me. And it was an empty plane. All we did was drink champagne all the way to Germany, landed in Germany, and then I pitched my way to getting a job teaching English. I say that because no one would hire me because I don't have a degree. So it was another thing. No.
So the years in the wine industry didn't work in your favor in any way?
Well, no, because on paper I was, great, a general manager of a winery or a wine venture, but that's it. I didn't have a degree. You don't know what that was like in the year 1996 or the year 2000. No degree, no door. No door.
Yeah, fair.
Plain and simple. You were just anyone without a degree. The CV went in the trash.
I suppose it's more common practice now. Like, people know the moment you've got your first job,
Nope.
you're in it for 2-3 years.
Yep.
Degree doesn't matter.
Nope.
It's the industry. But
Nope.
back then,
Nope.
had to be on paper.
Nope, literally without the degree, your CV went in the trash.
Right.
So I knocked on doors to try to teach English, thinking I can teach English, and they said, nope, no degree. Eventually, instead of giving up, I went to another business that I realized was teaching to business people. So in the area I was living in, Heidelberg, there were a lot of manufacturing plants, and I had worked in the food manufacturing sector. So I went to the owner, I got a meeting with him, and I said, you've got a problem. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm the most successful, English school here. And I said, English Academy for Adults. And I said, yeah, well, you're teaching regular English. What about business English? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, do you teach your people shareholder value, return on investment, return on capital, things like that? Well, no. I said, well, do you teach them manufacturing terms? Like, for example, I don't know, things about robotics. I said, well, I can do that. And I got myself a job teaching English.
Nice.
To people in the supply chain manufacturing space, which is where I had been working. And I had a grand time, 6 months doing that, getting tours of the BMW plant, getting tours of all the major plants there, teaching their senior executives. But also, again, I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life.
Great networking, though, if you're getting to speak to these high-level executives. Did that play a part in your future, or?
Nope.
No,
I thought, well, yeah, I'm their English teacher. Do I want to be an English teacher? And no disrespect to English teachers, it just wasn't what I wanted to do.
Well, I just wondered if it gave you an opportunity to kind of flash your knowledge, because if you're talking and educating them these things,
Yeah,
I think one of them would have a light bulb being like, oh, they...
Yeah, but I didn't have a degree. So again, it was, if you would try to get a job, the first thing would be like, well, where did you study? Did you study engineering? Did you study business? Yeah, but I don't have a degree.
So black or white.
It was black or white. It was 100% that. So irrespective of my knowledge, my experience, my eloquence, my attitude, my go-getting attitude or whatever, problem solving, didn't matter.
Yeah.
No degree, see you later.
Crazy.
So I applied for a job online back in the early days of online recruitment, and I got a job offer. No, I lie. I got an interview in London in publishing, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to go to London. I arrived here in 2001. I had £1,000 to my name. A friend of my brother-in-law let me stay in a room in Peckham. I don't know if you know Peckham. It was dodgy back in 2001, I'll tell you that much. And I got this interview for this job. They lowballed me at the interview and said, we'll pay you whatever, peanuts. And I needed it. I had £1,000 to my name. That's all I owned.
Yeah.
And all I had. And I walked out of the interview. I said, thanks, but no thanks. And I just walked out. And I desperately needed that job. And I said, no, bye. And I just walked out the door. Later, I found out that no one had ever rejected them because it was a pretty prestigious publishing business. And it was to do sales. And I said no. And within 5 minutes, they called me back and offered me a lot more money.
Nice.
So I took that job, and it was selling advertising in magazines.
Which you'd done before?
Which I'd done before. But this was a business with like 500 people or 1,000 people, 99% men. And I was the only woman, pretty much, or one of the only women in this pretty very male-dominated environment of sales in 2001 in London. Pretty hardcore.
Well, so how did it compare to the experience in Chile? Because you'd said the culture there was quite, the ladies go off and get married or look for a good marriage. So you'd experienced some level of misogyny, I'm guessing.
Huge.
And so how did that compare in London to the Chile culture?
The Chile culture was more sort of older, well-to-do family people saying, oh, you should get married and, your husband will take care of you. That sort of antiquated mentality. Whereas the London was the lad sort of, hardcore sales, laddish behavior. It was open sexism, open sexual aggression, open misogyny. It was a world full of drugs and rock and roll and just, it was crazy.
An English Wolf of Wall Street
An
kind
English,
of vibe.
yeah, it's not an exaggeration. It was an English Wolf of Wall Street, 100%.
So again, I'm sure everyone has different experiences, and I don't want to make it so binary as these two options, but I'm guessing for ladies at the time, it went either you go all in and you become like them to try and fit in, or you have to try and like carve your own path and identity. Strike me as the sort of personality that would choose the latter.
Yeah, I carved my own path.
Yeah.
I wasn't comfortable being like those guys. I made friends with them. I had a good time in the sense that they were affable. But I knew that I was going to be the top salesperson. I knew that I was going to be the top salesperson in that business. Why? Because I knew that I was going to work harder than they would. And so I have a growth mindset. To me, it's all about, yes, I have natural talent, but at the same time, I put a hell of a lot of work into it. So where my male colleagues were going to the pub after work and on weekends, I don't know, playing golf or hanging out with their friends, I was going to the library and I was writing down where I had failed or succeeded that week, what I hadn't said, what I should have said, what the top salesperson did. I studied it. I read every single book that I could on the subject of, manufacturing, supply chain, finance, which is where I was. My little bedsit in Peckham was filled with financial books, and I studied and I highlighted, and so I knew that this was my time to work harder than everybody. So I was the first one in the office, the last one out of the office, and I immediately went like a heat-seeking missile. Who is the number one salesperson here? Sat next to them, watched them, took notes of everything they did, and then adapted it to me, and thought, how can I do that?
Well, were they okay with that? Because
it's very competitive.
yeah, well, so I was going to say from a social dynamic
Yeah.
kind of way, like this, you come in, you're like, I'm going to beat the boys club,
Yeah.
and then you start beating them and become
Yeah.
the best salesperson. I'm amazed that the top salesperson let you sit next
Well,
to them
initially-
to kind of like take their...
Initially, they didn't know. I didn't say, hey, I want to beat you.
Yeah,
I was like, I want to learn from you, and I want to understand how to do this. And I did, and I watched them, and I got a seat, not sitting on top of the guy, but I was like, he's across from me, and I would just watch and see what he did, and then I would apply my own thinking and my own logic and what I had learned. And slowly but surely, I started to become the top salesperson in the business.
So what happened there when that shift started happening? Was there...
Well, the incredulity, people were like, what the hell? Who is this woman?
Yeah.
Who is this person here? People would stop to listen. The whole floor at one point would stop to listen to how I would sell and what I would say. The whole floor, all of these guys would just sit there and watch in awe, not understanding that I was applying empathy, business knowledge, a number of different types of characteristics, charm, and was able to sell quite well and quite quickly.
Well, that's quite nice to hear, because I'd almost have thought like the dynamic would make some enemies, and maybe it did. But
It did.
the fact that they wanted to like listen and
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah, at first they rubbished me. They're like, yeah, whatever, she's full of crap. You know, it's luck, it's luck, it's luck. I got a lot of that. I got a lot of teasing. I got a lot of, you know, as a lot of aggression. Of course I did, absolutely. But I didn't let it bother me. I was like, yeah, whatever. Basically what I would do, very funnily, anytime anybody would bother me, I would just look at them and just look behind them, which is where our boards were, where sales figures, look behind them. Then I'd look at my board and I'd go, you know, whatever, man. You can talk to me when you're close to my numbers.
Nice, yeah.
You know, and that was it. When you hit my numbers, you can talk to me. Didn't hurt the fact that I'm 5'10" and also an ex-basketball player, and I can sort of defend myself. So
Yeah. How long did it take you to become top salesperson?
I would say probably about 6 months.
Good amount.
Yeah,
Nice and
probably about
fast.
six months. Yeah.
Sneak up on them. So you got to top salesperson there, and as somebody who likes a challenge, I'd imagine being top salesperson only fulfilled you for so long till you're like, what's next?
Yeah. Then I wanted to become a manager, and my sales director wouldn't promote me. I remember walking into we were at an event once, and the directors were all sitting around the table, men, all men, talking about me, saying, how many people do we need to hire to find a Maria Villablanca? And how many people do we need to see? And they brought in a special company to do a psychological assessment, an assessment on my sales, to try to replicate me. And
Replicate you in general, so they got more of you across
Yeah.
the business, or
Yeah,
to
yeah.
replace you with a guy? Okay.
no,
okay.
to get more of me. So they started hiring. I mean, this is in their infinite wisdom. We must hire American women. That's it. And so all of a sudden, like 5 American women showed up, and they were like, yeah, that's the secret. We're going to hire American women. I was like, oh my God, are these guys this dumb?
Nothing like generalization.
You know, exactly. And I thought, no, I am me because I am me, because of the many things that have shaped me my entire life, whether it's being born in a dictatorship, leaving college, doing the thing. It's like a rock, right, in a river. It's the water sort of like shapes it over time. That's me. I'm me because of all of those bumps, all of those rides that I've been on.
Well, because you've obviously got such thick skin and always had this positive mental attitude. At any point, did the experiences of like, you know, these guys in various workplaces and that experience grind you down?
Yeah, of course it did. You know, I put on a brave face, but it was hard. It was hard. I mean, the sexist jokes, the inappropriate touching, the, you know, being slapped in the ass, the, you know, those things. Of course it does. There are moments where you think, what the hell am I doing here? Should I just have an easy life? But then I thought, why am I going to let them win? They're threatened by me. Why not just beat them at their own game? And eventually then I just became one of the guys. Although I wasn't necessarily one of the guys. I wasn't partaking in the same types of activities, but I earned the respect of a lot of people. And so then I wanted more seniority, and I got poached by another company to do that. And I became a sales manager, the top sales manager in my business. Very quickly. Then my team kept growing, and then they were like, well, we need you to do what you do, this magic, with other people. And so I became one of the youngest sales directors in a long time, and in my company, certainly. And then from there, it was just more people to train, more people to, and eventually I got to the point where I was managing director. I had like 300-400 people under me. I was traveling the world. I was managing people in Singapore, managing people in, Canada, managing people in the UK, etc. And then I went for the ultimate. I want to be a shareholder of this company. And the answer was no, absolutely not. And even though I was essential, I knew, and I remember at one point I had someone from the competition call me and say, we'll offer you to come because we know that if you leave, your whole sales infrastructure, that whole sales infrastructure leaves with you.
Crumbles.
Because they were so devoted to me.
What was their reason for saying no to giving you equity? Was it they just didn't want to part with it?
They didn't want to
or-
part with it
Right.
because they knew they wanted to sell the company and they didn't want to part with it. So in the end, I got to the point where I was so essential. I remember at one point my boss said to me, "Please don't ever get pregnant." And he said to me, because I was married at the time, and he said to my husband, "You better not ever get her pregnant because we need her." My boss would say to me, "Your being out of the office costs me at least £50,000 a day." So I never took vacations. I never did anything. I took 2 days off to get married. And that's just how I was. I was relentless. I was 18 hours days. I was an animal, just constantly working.
Well, I'm absolutely amazed at the. It's not even arrogance, it's shooting themselves in the foot. Why risk saying no when you wanted equity? If that's the case, if it's 50,000 a day, the
Because
risk
by
of
this
you
point
leaving must be much higher.
Much higher, but I think they realized, because I'd been there for many years, that I also was making a ton of money. So they thought, she's not going to leave. She's never going to leave. And so
Enough
eventually,
direct competition to just come in, offer you the same or more with equity, and
absolutely. But
Gone.
they were just so self-assured. So then what happened is one day I then went to the owner and I said, "You know what? I'm out. That's it. I didn't have another job. I just said, I'm out. I can't do this. If you want me to fix this business," because by that point I was living in Canada and they wanted me to come back to the UK, the headquarters, I said, "There's only one way I'm going to do it, and that is if I sit equally with you guys on the board." I said, "You guys are so well removed from reality. You guys sit up in your ivory tower and you dictate rules and you have no idea what's happening on the ground. I'm the one that's running this business. And if you don't remunerate me and give me the equity and the seat on that table, then this whole thing will crumble without me." And so that's it. They did it. And I got a seat on the table.
you've always been good at setting your boundaries and saying
Yeah.
no things that aren't right and
Yeah.
telling people what you need.
Yes.
I know you have moved into coaching a little bit, haven't you? You start
Yeah, I
helping
mentor
people
people.
realize their worth.
Yeah. I mentor people. I created the first women in business at our business. And I have coached other women on how to do this. I speak at events. Just recently, I was at an event for Women's International Day, talking about women in business, and there were a bunch of younger women who had no idea some of the things that we'd gone through to pave the way for the way that they can run the work in business today. So I remember saying I never had a mentor, never had a female mentor, because there were no female mentors. There was no one I could look up to and say, "That's who I want to be."
Yeah.
So I had to carve my own way. And therefore, I think it's my duty and my responsibility to sort of help others carve their way too, and to help them avoid the kind of bumps along the road that I had to deal with.
Well, do you find a lot of the time educating them is in the know your worth, know your boundaries, say what you need? Because I think that's one of the key things, right? A lot of guys are vocal in business,
Well-
like, I want this, I need this.
One of the stories that I told, which is a true story, I was guilty of bias. When I was sales director, I promoted only men. And I didn't realize it. I just realized all of a sudden one day that all my managers were men. And I remember thinking, well, how did this happen? How did I do this when there are very capable women that should be managers? And then I remembered thinking, well, this is the problem. And I'm generalizing, and I always say this, I am generalizing. Women tend to be very bad self-promoters. Women, we always label under the misapprehension that men, our bosses, will recognize our work because it's good work. Whereas men will do, and again, I'm generalizing, will do, I don't know, the minimal effort and go, "Did you see that? Did you see? I just did that. I did that. Do you see that? That's right. I did that." And so what was happening to me is that the men would arrive in my office and say, "Maria, did you see that big deal? I just did that deal. Maria, did you see this?" And they were constantly in my face. So when I went home and thinking, "Oh, I've got a new managerial position opening up. Who should I give it to? Oh, yeah, that's right. So-and-so was in my office. He's a really confident guy. Yeah, he's a good leader." And I'd promote the men. And I'd pass by all the women, like in the back of the office, because they never approached me. They never said, "Hey, did you see that? I did that." Whereas I did that. I'm that person. So I normally did say that to my bosses regularly. "Did you see that? Yeah, I did
Yeah.
that. I did that."
Do you think there was an intimidation factor with, because obviously, like you said, you're quite a strong personality, standing
Yes.
5'10", like if you were able to,
So I am intimidating. I get that. That comes from had that in high school. I was I'm a leader. And so I did that personality test. I got the same personality thing as, like, I don't know, Margaret Thatcher and all these people. I am generally like that. So I'm not your fuzzy, warm, approachable person. And that puts people off sometimes. As a matter of fact, even today doing a photo shoot, the guys asking me to do a serious face, and they were like, damn, that was scary. So I have that. I get that. No, it comes down to, I think, women in general don't advertise their own successes. And so in general, and that's what I said in the meeting I had, is that you need to be your best self-promoters. You need to be there and reminding people that you've solved problems, that you've done this, so long as you put in the hard work. Now, that doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't at all. There's a number of things that need to happen, but not doing it is certainly going to guarantee failure.
So when you had that revelation that you had your own internal biases, what did you start doing differently for your own employees?
Two things. First, I started the Women in Business section and started to train and motivate all the women in my business to how to do that. That's number one. Number two is that I would bring the women in and say, right, tell me what you've done recently. Tell me about what you did. Tell me something good you did, why that helped the business. And so I would have to, at some point, drag it out of them.
Yeah.
And then I'd realize, wow, okay, that was really good. And then take some chances. You know what? I'm going to promote you, and I'm going to give you this shot. And then took them under my wing and helped them achieve as much as they could.
How long ago did you realize this?
This must have been about 15 years ago.
So you've been on the journey of educating,
Yeah.
coaching in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Like one of the big dialogues that's going on in the world is obviously, like equality in the workplace and stuff. I read your article from International Women's Day, and I loved the way you put it, that it's not about creating a sisterhood to counter up against the decades of brotherhood. It's about trying to bring everyone together. How are you finding that fight?
Well, I think there are a lot of male allies, and we can't forget the male allies in the room, and that is an important thing. And there are a lot of men that do understand that we need to diversify our teams, not for the sake of some sort of quota, but for the sake of actually trying to weather this volatility we have in business today. We are living an era of quite a lot of significant change since the pandemic. It's been changing beforehand, and I think that you need to have disruptors and critical thinkers and people around the table that might have a different opinion to you. So it's a survival thing, in my opinion. It's not so much of, okay, I've got 3 women, yay. It's about, are these the right critical thinkers around me to help me weather this uncertainty?
So you're obviously, are you educating business owners and business leaders as well about how they can be more intelligently diverse?
Challenging their norms, and I'm challenging. What I do with my business today is I like to spark dialogue around these topics. That's what my podcast is about transforming your business from analog to digital, from antiquated business models to new business models. It's about transformation, because I firmly believe that the world is in a very different place than it was 10, 20 years ago. And either you adapt to this new environment or you die out like the dinosaurs.
So when they invite you in or you approach them, what are 2, 3 big questions you ask them to get them thinking, where very often they're like, oh, I've never thought about things that way. Oh, that's such a good point. Where do you find across the board they're all missing thinking?
I think, first of all, I'm not a coach by profession. I'm not doing that every day. To me, I am a connector of people, someone who sparks dialogue, someone who interviews other people. I create events, I create content, I'm a content creator. To me, it's about asking the kinds of questions from the prism of both a CEO, an entrepreneur, and a woman. The questions that go hand in hand. Is this the right kind of thing that's going to create value for my business, for my shareholders, for my clients? And so with that in mind, also being a woman of color, a Latin American woman, a woman, I've had to fight my way through for many years, and people, perhaps young people, don't understand what it was like to have your doors shut before you could even apply to a job because you didn't have a degree, because your name was Maria Villablanca. It was a tough environment. So to me, it's about surrounding yourself with people that ask the right questions that can help you, no matter what they look like.
So how do you spend your days now then? What's most of your time invested in?
My dogs. No, apart from that, it is in talking to company leaders from the world. So I will have conversations, whether it's recording my podcasts with huge CXO, chief operating officers, chief sustainability officers from Fortune 500 companies. It'll be talking to my team, discussing content ideas for Supply Chain TV, for my newsletter, for the newsletter of the company. It'll be managing the team. So I am CEO, CFO, COO, you name it. It's a small business, so you all have to muck in. It's about training, developing the team as well, educating them. It's about, so I spend my day mostly juggling all of that. And then here's an important thing. I am also a woman with family dependents, and I have to take care of family. I've got to juggle a lot of things, which is something that we don't speak a lot about as a woman CXO. I am a woman who juggles between having to take a Zoom meeting and having to give my dad his cancer medication. He's 87. He's recently been diagnosed with cancer. Having to take the dogs out, having to go grocery shopping, having to speak with someone from MIT. This is how I spend my day, juggling those things.
So how do you find it juggling those things? If it's like you said, it's a problem out there that people don't talk about. For anyone who's listening in the same boat but maybe doesn't know how to manage it, what would you say is your process for helping you find some balance?
I think it would be remiss of me, and I think it is remiss of anybody that comes on to any show and says it's easy, because that's bullshit. It isn't easy. There are days where I am like pulling my hair out and thinking, oh my God, how the hell am I going to do this? But one thing I did learn, because I had two mini strokes a couple of years ago, is I am not going to kill myself for anything or anyone. So as a result, when I feel overwhelmed, I step away. I push back and I think, you know what? No, I am not going to go and take this meeting because I have to go get out and walk the dogs in nature and reabsorb things. So the reality is, how do I do it? One step at a time. And some days it's hard. Some days it's harder. Some days it's a struggle, but you ask for help. I delegate. I talk to my team. Hey, can you get me out of this meeting? Hey, can you make my apologies, but I'm not going to make that meeting? Or this meeting should be an email. Can you just send me an email instead? So you realize that you have to have balance. If not, you will go insane and you can't do it all.
Well, so how do you find it slowing down, Maria? Because obviously you love being actively involved in things and supporting people, working on things. Like, at what point did you find you had to slow down?
Well, the mini stroke was a pretty big...
Yes, I was thinking that. That's why I took the pause there. I was like, I think I know that.
That was a pretty big, yeah.
So, but was that kind of the kick up?
That was it. That was it. Beforehand, I was working 18-hour days. I had a mini stroke, right? One night on my own.
Stress-based?
Yeah, 100%. It wasn't a full-on stroke. It was a mini stroke in the sense that it was visible on my CT scan, et cetera, but it wasn't a full-on, blood thing that, broke. But I went to work the next day. I had it at night, took some paracetamol, and thought, well, I started to talk myself out of it. No, it wasn't a stroke. It was a headache. It must have been my sinuses. And I went to work the next day and did a board meeting. And then I push through, and I push through, like I always do. I push through. That's me all over. Give me a crisis, I will push through. I'm like the beast of burden, the ox that just carries on all the weight for everybody and pushes through. I don't understand failure.
Well, that's why I guess I asked the question, how do you find slowing down, and
I had to learn.
Do it?
I had to learn. I had to unlearn things. So I then went home after the board meeting, had a second mini stroke, and I landed in the hospital. And when you're faced with a doctor that says, we might have to have brain surgery, you might have to have brain surgery in the next hour because of this, because of the swelling in your brain, reality hits you in the face twice, And so I had to learn, like you learn another discipline, like playing the guitar. I had to learn about taking time for myself. I had to learn to say no. I had to learn to say, you know what? It's 5 o'clock. I am going to turn everything off and I'm going to go watch a movie and not feel guilty about it.
And do you think you've reached that point, or is it still something you're trying to learn?
It's something I struggle with a lot. It's a lot less. Sometimes I think I feel apologetic when I have to go. I say, you know what? I'm going to go to the supermarket now because it's the only time in my calendar that I can go to the supermarket. And then I feel guilty, and I apologize to my business partner or my team. It's like, I'm sorry, I had to go do this. And then I realize, well, no, That's just how it is. And I don't answer emails on the weekend. I don't answer business calls on the weekend. I am generally sort of disciplined, just like you would be disciplined about anything. You have to have that discipline.
Yeah, that's good. So what's the big plans now? What's the future looking like for you?
World domination.
Yeah, good.
It's doing what I love, doing more of it. It's expanding, growing, going out there to meet more people, more interesting people, being a content creator, getting myself outside of my comfort zone, with like today doing photo shoots that are so weird for me, posting selfies. I mean, come on, that's so not me and not my generation. But doing all those things, challenging myself.
So it's like you said, it's not, and we spoke about it just before we got started. Content creation is such a huge thing now, and everyone expects it from Gen Zs and millennials, but like for
Yes.
Gen X and above, it's some people are still a bit like, especially outside of America, it's
And
like, oh,
and
this is
and in
weird.
business to business, this isn't something like
Course,
I'm
yeah.
I'm not doing it for like the consumer, like I'm doing it from business leader to business leader. Yeah, I still get a bit of looks like, what, you do a podcast? Absolutely, but I think that I'd like to think that I'm a bit ahead of my time, I guess, for my generation. I saw that this is something that needs to happen for business to business, and I want to be there, want to be a pioneer in this. I'm already 175 episodes into my podcast. I've been doing it a while. So what's next? More content creation, better content creation, interesting topics, getting interesting people involved.
What advice would you give to other B2B businesses who want to start creating content but think, oh, what if I put off potential customers, clients, whatever? What pushes you through? And
I think the first thing I would say, looking at it from the lens of a CEO, I can actually demonstrate significant value to my business from a commercial perspective from creating content. And that's something a CEO, why would I do anything? I'm not going to do anything unless there's passion project stuff. Ooh, I'd love to do this because it's a passion of mine. But I've actually seen commercial revenue come in through the work that I do creating content. So that's enough motivation. If there's anyone listening who's in B2B, that is it. Understand that you can connect the dots between content creation, sparking dialogue, debate, growing brand, and commerciality.
nice. And just one last question, Maria. With such a full life, full of adventures and stuff, it's probably hard to narrow it down to one. But like, what would you say has been the biggest lesson you've
Failure.
had?
Failure, and failure. If I had not failed, I would have been on a path of privilege, echo chambers, and I would have thrown a tantrum anytime something happened. Whereas now, for me, failure is an opportunity for growth.
So really for anyone because failure never feels good, and everyone quite often hears, if you fail fast, move on. What is like a mental almost structure you could tell people? Because people hear all the time, if you fail, it's fine, move on. But what would you say to people to really just push past it?
Failure is like death in some ways. You have to go through stages. You have to grieve. You have to be sad. You have to be angry. You have to have regret. You have to do all of those things. So sit in it for a little bit. And I have sat in my failure and maybe not dwelled in it, but don't live in it. Don't live in your failure. Understand that failure is okay. Understand that failure is something to learn from, and then look for the opportunity in failure. And there is always one. There's always an opportunity in failure.
I love it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.